Good morning. In the last video, we discussed about quantitative revolution. Today, let's have an understanding about behavioralism. Behavioralism എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു approach, behavioral approach അല്ലെങ്കിൽ behavioralism. Now, quantitative revolution, as we have discussed in the last video, had a lot of criticism. So, this criticism was based on its inability to actually humanize model making. Now, in quantitative revolution, we have already seen that it was normative, it was a general, basis, it was done on a general basis. What they used to do was, they used to assume that man is a rational economic being, and there is this concept of isotropic space. These two assumptions എപ്പോഴും ക്വാണ്ടിറ്റേറ്റീവ് റെവല്യൂഷൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ഇതിൻ്റെ ഫലമായിട്ടാണ് ഇവർ പല മോഡൽസും ഒക്കെ ക്രിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്തിരുന്നത്. Now there were serious criticisms against this. Now what happened was, quantitative revolution അവരുടെ പാരമ്യത്തിലെത്തിയപ്പോൾ സമയത്ത്, that was in the 60s, they totally dehumanized model making and all that. So there were a few criticisms and valid criticisms against quantitative revolution. One of them was behavioralism. Behavioralism and understanding was simple. Now, man and environment, these are the two entities here. Man's understanding of environment, of equal environment, are not the same. Man understands his environment. Two people understand an environment differently. Two people may be from the same geographical area, they're from the same geographical region, and maybe from different socio-cultural background, they'll perceive their environment very differently. For example, we have this minorities, majorities. For pala sthalangalilum, the minority people, some of the minority people might feel that they are not wanted here. So this happens with class divide also. Chala classes of people, low class, low middle class, they'll feel that they're not welcome at certain places. Okay, so they perceive the environment. The environment the exists as it is, but it is actually that those people who make a mental image of the environment they reside in, or an event or a phenomenon which happens, people actually have a separate image of the environment. But this was the basic idea behind behavioralism. Behavioralism എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ behavioralism says that you cannot actually make and study group of people, in order to make models. Yes, behavioralism also believes in models, but they want to make models which actually have an understanding about individual perception. Now, this behaviorism actually came in from philosophy. Now, the understanding behind behavioralism is simple. As I have said earlier, man makes every individual is different. Every individual's mental image of the environment or a phenomenon or an event is different to each other. Now, understanding of these phenomena is important in order to make models and laws. So, the attempt was to make models and laws exactly like the quantitative revolution, but those models in quantitative revolution were mechanistic. They were like statistical, but here it was more inclusive. That's what these people believed. അപ്പോൾ ആരൊക്കെയായിരുന്നു ഇതിൻ്റെ പ്രൊപ്പോണൻസ്? ഇതിൻ്റെ കുറച്ച് ആൾക്കാരെ അറിയണം, ഇതിൻ്റെ ബേസിക് അണ്ടർസ്റ്റാൻഡിങ്. Before that, behavioralism actually believes in two environments. One, an objective environment, and two, a behavioral environment. An objective environment is what we see in space. It's what is there in space. അതാണ് ഒരു ഒബ്ജക്റ്റീവ് എൻവയൺമെൻറ്റ്. എന്നാൽ ബിഹേവിയറൽ എന്തുവാ? നേരത്തെ പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ ഈ ബിഹേവിയറൽ ഇസ് കംപ്ലീറ്റ്ലി ഔട്ട് ഓഫ് കോഗ്നിഷൻ, COGNITION, cognition, or a mental image or a perception that man makes up for us about his environment or an event or a phenomenon. Okay, so behavioralism, അതിന് കുറച്ച് സാലിയൻ ഫീച്ചേഴ്സ് ഉണ്ട്. ഈ ബിഹേവിയറലിസത്തിൻ്റെ കുറച്ച് സാലിയൻ ഫീച്ചേഴ്സ്, കുറച്ച് ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻറ്റ് ഫീച്ചേഴ്സ് ഉണ്ട്. ഒന്ന്, this believes in model making, as I said, but those models are totally different from what the quantitative revolution says. One. Second, it is, you may say, it dwells on man-environment relationship. The idea is simple: man influences the environment, and subsequently the environment influences man back. So that's the whole idea. So man has, so it's probabilistic, but it is not positivist. Positivism, positivism is actually what is real. Now here it talks about reality, but this reality is actually something that we make a mental image upon. Okay, so these are some of the salient features of behavioralism. ഇതിൻ്റെ ഒരു ഹിസ്റ്റോറിക്കൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ളൊരു അണ്ടർസ്റ്റാൻഡിങ് നമുക്ക് ആവശ്യമാണ്. എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഇത് ഇവോൾവ് ചെയ്തത്? ഇത് 1948 റൈറ്റ്, WRIGHT, റൈറ്റ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞൊരു പ്രൊപ്പണൻ്റ് ആയിരുന്നു ഇത് കൊണ്ടുവന്നത്. He made a case for understanding human psyche and behavior, who actually, how to, present itself before an environmental phenomena, how humans react to certain phenomena. എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് he made a paper, right? അതിനുശേഷം മോസ്റ്റ് ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരാൾ വന്നു, കെർക്ക് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ ഒരാൾ, KIRK, Kirk. Now Kirk believes, and his quote is a little famous, he says that man from every human being, so for example a person who is there in a certain environment in the same geographical region with different socio-economic background will perceive environment differently to that of another person who lives in the same geographical region but having a different socio-economic environment or a background. So that is something that Kirk actually based on. So his model was based on that. Kirk was the first person to have made a model in terms of behavioralism. Then we had a couple of other people who came. So Balding ennu parnja oral vannu. Balding. Now Balding has something very interesting to say. He actually made a model about man-environment relationship. Man-environment relationship. Balding said that what we have said earlier, man influences the environment. He makes a mental image of that environment and he influences it according to the mental perception or according to the cognition he has of that environment, and subsequently the environment influences the person. So it is like both ways. Okay, man try to influence the environment with the image that he has of that environment. Wolpert എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ ഒരാളുണ്ട്, WOLPERT. വോൾപ്പേർട്ടിൻ്റെ പ്രത്യേകത, he went to Sweden. He made a study about the farmers in Sweden, and some farmers were very reluctant to move from their place. Why? Because they perceive that their environment, although that is not rational if you look at it other way, but for them that is the best environment for them. So they are not willing to actually leave their environment. So Wolpert said, so it is always about human behavior, and it is individualistic. It cannot be studied in groups. Of course, later on we had group-based behavioral studies also, because certain group of people, who come from the same background actually respond to a certain event in a similar way, right? Why? Because they make a similar mental image of that environment or an event or a phenomenon. So that's what Balding said. Okay, Balding was another important contributor. Then there was a person called Porteous. Porteous was very important in the sense he classified environment into three. So he said that there is a phenomenal environment, there is a behavioral environment, there is a contextual environment. Contextual. So three of them: phenomenal, behavioral. Phenomenal environment means the real objective environment that we have said. The second one, the behavioral environment, so which is kind of the human behavior and the image that they make of. And third is the contextual environment. Contextual here means cultural environment. Okay. Then there was a guy called Somersfield. Somersfield, SOMMERSFIELD, Somersfield. He actually classified it into four. So different types of environments, like objective environment here, and then you had a behavioral environment second, then there is a a perceptual environment. Okay, fully divided. So he actually divided into four. Please look at the notes to see the four types of environment that he said. So historically develop paradigm on that. So this is a reactionary paradigm. First of all, behavioralism is reactionary. They attempted to make models of individual human behavior to certain phenomena, but sadly they ended up with no models. So one of the salient features of behavioralism again was they had taken in inputs from many other fields like psychology, like sociology, like philosophy, history. All those fields they had taken inputs and all, but sadly they could not make anything of their own. So there are no models of behavioralism which are properly behavioralistic. So that is a big problem with this way of approach of studying geography. Now, the problem with behavioralism again, the criticism to behavioralism actually is based on the fact that they could not achieve much because there are problems with their approach. The approach and the problems എന്തൊക്കെയാണ്? ഒന്ന്, ക്വാണ്ടിറ്റേറ്റീവിന് എതിർത്ത് വന്ന ഒരു ഫിനോമിനൻ എന്ന നിലയ്ക്ക് അതിനൊരു ഓൾട്ടർനേറ്റീവായിട്ട് ഇവർക്ക് മോഡൽസും കാര്യങ്ങളും ക്രിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റിയില്ല. ഓൾദോ ദോസ് പീപ്പിൾ ബിലീവ്ഡ് ഇൻ മേക്കിംഗ് മോഡൽസ് ആൻഡ് ദേ വാണ്ടഡ് ടു മേക്ക് ദോസ് മോഡൽസ് ഹ്യൂമനിസ്റ്റിക് ആൻഡ് ഇൻക്ലൂസീവ്, ദേ വെർ നോട്ട് ഏബിൾ ടു ഡു സോ ഇൻ ദ പ്രോപ്പർ സെൻസ് ഓഫ് ദ ടേം. സോ ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് ദ മെയിൻ ക്രിറ്റിസിസം അബൌട്ട് ബിഹേവിയറലിസം. അപ്പോൾ നമുക്കറിയാം ഒരു 60s ബിഹേവിയറലിസം ഒക്കെ പോപ്പുലറായത്. അപ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ ക്വാണ്ടിറ്റേറ്റീവ് റെവല്യൂഷനൊക്കെ അതിൻ്റെ പാരമ്യത്തിലെത്തിയ സമയത്ത് ബിഹേവിയറലിസം എന്ന കോൺസെപ്റ്റ് വന്നു. ഇതിനോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ 70s ബിഗിനിങ്ങിൽ there was another approach called radical geography അല്ലെങ്കിൽ radical approach to geography. There were a couple of, this actually originated in the United States. നമ്മൾ കഴിഞ്ഞ വീഡിയോയിൽ കണ്ട ഹാഗറ്റ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞൊരു പേഴ്സൺ, അദ്ദേഹമാണ് ഇതിൻ്റെ ഉപജ്ഞാതാവ്. അത് കുറേ ആൾക്കാർ ഈ ഒരു റാഡിക്കൽ വ്യൂ ഓഫ് ജോഗ്രഫിയിൽ വിശ്വസിച്ചു തുടങ്ങി. അതിൻ്റെ കാരണങ്ങളുണ്ട്. There were a couple of things which were happening in the United States at that time. One, there was this Vietnam War which America lost. Okay. Second reason was that black-white struggle. There was a racist struggle which was happening there, and Martin Luther King and all there were present at that time. So that was another event. And third thing was huge income divide that was happening in urban areas. Urban areas will bhayangaramaya, and it was creating a lot of tension, class-based tension and all that. So class divide started to happen in urban areas in the United States, and people started to feel a lot of pressure because of that. All the reasons were all contributed to a criticism, heavy criticism against the quantitative revolution in geography. People said that no, the idea is to make more inclusive. The existing paradigms of geography or economy or social life has to change, and that approach we commonly call it as a radical approach. This was heavily influenced by Marxism. Marxism വളരെ heavily influenced ആണ് ഇത്. So Marxism talks about equality of classes. So proletarianism of class struggle, ഇതൊക്കെയാണ് മാർക്സിസം പറയുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ ഈക്വാലിറ്റി ഓഫ് ക്ലാസസ് വരണമെങ്കിൽ this class divide has to stop. So there has to be steps needed for income, eradicating income inequality. There was other social issues in place, like racism and all that. Now, this is called radical geography. Radical geography was actually a whiff of fresh air. So when people thought that, okay, let us go back to Marxism and understand it better and use that Marxism towards how to actually influence the study of geography as a discipline. They actually were very keen. The youth were particularly very interested in Marxism because, class struggle and things like that. But radicalism could not achieve its aims, primarily for the reason that radicalism was symbolized by communism, which was actually dying across the world. Okay, so that was one reason. Second was there were not many good studies in terms of radical geography in those communist nations. The studies were primarily happening in the United States, which was not a communist nation by that in that sense. So that is one drawback about radical geography. That scheme was not explored. Why? Because the socio-economic, social conditions or the political beliefs of many nations across the world are not keen towards Marxism, because Marxism has been already linked with communism and socialism and all that, which was against the worldview. So radical geography was actually a criticism, developed as a criticism to quantitative revolution, but this was more a response to the prevalent situation at that time in the United States. So they said that this is a time to change the understanding of this discipline. We have to make it more inclusive. We have to be different from this way of economic life, like driven by capitalism, will not work. We have to find alternative models, and one of the alternative models they were quite interested in or attracted to was Marxism. So that is radical geography. അപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ ഇന്ന് രണ്ട് പാരഡിംസ് കൂടെ കണ്ടു. One is behavioralism, the other is radicalism. So the next videos we will look at welfare approach.